I'm not talking about the mayor or the owner of the largest business in town. I'm talking about a dozen to 20 average folks, a single mom, a plumber, a delivery man, who, under the radar, just simply have a lot of impact with the people that they connect with. And they have a lot of real positive impact. It's just by the nature of their personality and the kind of things that they do. They just spread cheer everywhere they go. And then I want you to imagine that that dozen to 20 people actually discovered each other and decided, hey, we can have an even better positive impact on this community if we meet once a week and talk about how to do that. And so once a week, this dozen to 20 people that everybody knows, but nobody knows that everybody knows them, who have a great positive impact on the community, once a week they meet and they get better at it. And then I want you to imagine that that weekly meeting that dozen to 20 influencers have each week, I want you to imagine that that weekly meeting is a Sunday morning church service. How would that change what we expect to do and get out of a Sunday morning church? If we weren't coming just to see friends, but if we were coming to actually learn how to be a better positive impact for Jesus on our community, if we were actually gathering with other people who also want to be a positive impact for Jesus upon our community. For too many years, we've measured ministry success by church attendance. And I don't just mean recently with the church growth movement, I mean way back in the day. How many of you are old enough to remember having gone to a church where maybe it was a small church, but they had a wood sign on the side with changeable lettering where it said, last week's attendance, this week's attendance, offering a year ago, offering last week, right? How many of you remember back when we gave gold stars for perfect attendance for the kids in Sunday school, right? A couple of us in the room are that. We've been doing this a long time, folks. Counting attendance has been done for a long time. This is not a new phenomenon. And we have to shift our focus from attendance to influence. We are living in a post-Christian environment, if you haven't noticed yet. Right? I do a lot of travel, and some of the times that I'm doing traveling is in the American South and Midwest, which is still very Bible Belt. But Australia, I've lived in Canada and California, and I think Australia is probably way more, at least as post-Christian as Canada and California are. There's not a lot of Bible Belt, right? And so we have to look at, and we have to realize we are now in an environment where the average person we're going to meet is probably not hostile to the gospel. They probably don't know enough about it to be hostile to it. It's just not the thing they do. It hasn't occurred to them that they might go to a church on a Sunday. What do you mean? You go to church on Sunday? What does that mean? It's like hearing somebody say, I play pickleball, which is apparently a new sport, which I'd never heard of. There's a pickleball court now all of a sudden in my hometown. I have no idea what pickleball is. Sounds interesting. I might check it out someday. But if somebody came to me and said, I play pickleball, everybody should play pickleball, I'd go, I just don't like pickleball. I don't even know what that is. I'm not mad at it. I'm not anti-pickleball. And we've got a whole bunch of people in our community. They're not anti-church. They just never heard of it. It's not on their radar screen. And so the idea that some churches have a whole bunch more people in it and other churches have a whole lot fewer people in it, that is a problem because it sounds like it's not church growth, it's consolidation in a lot of situations. Because the only really church growth that matters is if Christians are increasing as a percentage of the overall population. And I'm assuming that's not the case in Australia. I know it's not the case in Orange County where I live. In the last 40 years, with all these megachurches popping up, we have not increased Christians as a percentage of our population, which means Christians are just gathering into larger groups. Now, there's nothing wrong with us gathering into larger groups, but let's not call it church growth or kingdom impact because it's just consolidation. So the fact that our tastes are changing is neither here nor there. It's not a positive or a negative. It's not a downer on the megachurch or anything. It's just simply, let's recognize what it is and is not. So we have to shift our focus from we've got to get more people in the building to what kind of influence are we as followers of Jesus having on the community of people who don't even have church on their radar because they are now the third or fourth generation of their family that hasn't attended church. Most of the kids in your community have never had a grandparent or great-grandparent pray for them. We are that post-Christian now. So it can't just be about putting people in the building anymore. That's not enough. It never was enough, but it certainly cannot be anymore. We have to shift our focus from attendance to influence. Now, when I'm talking to a lot of pastors, a question I often get, especially from smaller congregations, is, and especially if a pastor is bivocational, that means they're working a full-time job and then pastoring as well as that. They'll often say, I don't know how to, I have so few hours to put into pastoring. I feel like every time I put an hour into pastoring my people, it's an hour that I'm not doing outreach to other people. And every time I spend an hour reaching other people, it's an hour that I have to steal from pastoring my own people. Which one should I do? And here's my answer to them. Equip the people you have to reach the people you don't have. This goes back to the pastoral prime mandate. So as members, we have to look at it and say, we are coming to be equipped to go out and do the job that God has given every single one of his followers to do. The Great Commission was not just given to pastoral leaders. The Great Commission was given to every single believer. So when we come on Sunday, we're not coming just to meet with our friends, although that's wonderful. We're not coming to hear what we want to hear. We're coming to be equipped for a job, and at times that might mean hearing difficult things, but it certainly means leaving. When we leave, we don't not do anything about what we heard. We have to do something about what we've heard. So how do we start doing that? How do we start equipping the people we have to reach the people we don't have? And if you are in any position of leadership in the church, this applies to you, from the pastor to a department official to whoever that might be. Start with one. Don't go out. We are crowd obsessed. And we're too interested in building a crowd and getting more people in the room for the class I'm teaching or for whatever it might be. But if you want to do real discipleship, you start with one. When I showed up at our church 27 years ago, 30 people on a big Sunday, a dozen on an average Sunday, the youth pastor who had taken over after the previous youth pastor left because of the church split over music, he was just a kid who was in the youth group who all of a sudden decided, I think I need to step up and help out. And when I showed up, he was being called a youth pastor. He'd never had a single class on it, didn't know what he was doing. But he was the only one I had. Everybody else was older and tired. He was the only young guy in the room. So I said, let's meet once a week and we're going to talk this through. So he was so young, we sat down once a week. I had coffee, he had chocolate milk. It's true. And we just sat down and I just mentored him. And every week I told him, okay, you know that thing you did, the way you said, don't do that again. And every week there was a new thing he did that was stupid. But every week it was a new stupid. He wasn't repeating the same stupid. Right? There's hope in that. Right? If it's the same stupid, we got a problem. If it's new stupid, okay. Right? You're learning your lessons and you're trying new stuff. And I started with him. Why? Because he was available. So don't look around to build a crowd. Look around for someone who's willing and available and begin to live life with them and to pour into them and to instruct them and to mentor them. Start with one. And then how do you find that first one? Well, we find leaders by looking for servants. Don't start with leaders, start with servants. Here's an example. A couple years ago, I was walking into the church on a Sunday morning. Way ahead of me were 3 teenagers coming into the front door, and there was a broken coffee cup by the front door. The first one walked by it, didn't see it. The second one kicked it aside like he was upset, like, what's wrong with the janitor? Why didn't they clean this up? The third kid saw it, went over, picked it up, walked into the church, dropped it in the garbage, kept going with his friends. So at the end of the service, I found that third kid, and I said, hey, come here, I want to talk to you. You're not in trouble. Pastor, anytime you do that to a kid during service, tell them right away they're not in trouble, unless they are. Come over here, you're not in trouble. Okay, well, and I told him about the coffee cup. He was so naive, his answer was I not supposed to do that? I said, oh no, you were supposed to do that. That's great. I said, I think you may be a leader in our church. He said, because I picked up a broken coffee cup? I said, yeah. And you notice I didn't say I think you might become a leader. I said, I think you might be a leader. I said, here's what I want you to do. You know how you help to tear down the tables and chairs after the church service? Yeah. I said, next week, have a friend help you. That's all? Yeah, that's all. The next week, he had 3 friends helping him. I went, I got me a leader. Right? I gave him a simple test. I found a servant, gave him a simple test of leadership. Now, if he had not found someone to help him, I'd have said, hey, you want to try that again next week? Okay. 3rd week, no. 4th week, no. At that point, I would go, okay, I don't have a leader, at least not yet, but I have a willing servant, and that's a good thing. See, if you start with servanthood, you can't go wrong. There's no loss ever. Even if he hadn't proven himself to be a leader, I would have discovered a good servant, and that we always need that. Now, he happened to have passed that simple test of leadership, and so he stepped into leadership. So you find leaders by looking for servants because it's easier to teach a servant to lead than to teach a leader to serve. In fact, it's almost impossible to teach a leader to serve. So don't start with leaders. Start with servants. Start with the willing. Start with those who are passionate and willing and who have time. Some people are passionate and willing, but they don't have time. That's fine. It's not your season now. But if you're passionate, you're willing, and you're willing to carve out the time for it, I will spend time with you to help you get to help disciple you, to help to bring you along, to help you discover your gifting. And sometimes you'll give them a one test of leadership, and that won't work, but a different one will, because they're not called to that kind of leadership. They're called to a different kind of leadership. So how do we start raising them up into maturity? The best way I know is the Old Testament story about Jethro. Jethro was Moses' father-in-law. So God frees the people from slavery in Egypt using Moses. And a couple months later, after leading them through the Red Sea, Moses' father-in-law comes to visit them. And the Bible says that he watches Moses, the husband of his daughter and the father of his grandchildren. He watches Moses as the only thing he does every day from dawn till dusk is moderate the disputes of the Hebrews. So he goes to him and he gives him the most, what I love, it's the most understated command in Scripture. What you are doing is not good. That's the actual phrasing of it. What you are doing is not good. And he says, you can't do this. This is not right. Instead, put people in charge of thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. Now, what we'll often do is we'll look at that and go, thousands, that's not for me. You know, I got 7 people in my department. I've only got 25 people in my church. I don't have thousands, hundreds, or fifties. But here's the deal. After you find your servant, then you want to find a level 10 leader. So when I gave that young man a test of find a person to help you tear down the chairs, that was a test of level 10 leadership. I didn't ask him, can you run the youth department for me? I said, can you have a friend help you stack chairs? That's entry-level leadership. He passed that. I realized I've got a level 10 leader. It turns out with that same young man, that he also stepped up and did level 50 leadership. And he's really grown in his faith, and he's in full-time ministry now. And some don't. Sometimes they'll stall out at that. And now, so if level 10 leadership is, I'm going to ask a couple of friends to help me stack chairs, level 50 leadership might be something like, a couple months later, he comes to me and he goes, and this didn't actually happen, but this is what it would look like. Comes to me and says, Pastor, is it okay if I put together a schedule for setup and tear down so that you don't have to think about it anymore? And I'm just going to put the schedule together, and every couple months I'll send you a new schedule so that we've got all the setup and all the tear down done. I'll just oversee that for you. Can I do that for you? No, of course not. That would be a terrible thing. Yes. What is that? Level 50 leadership. Level 10 is, for that event, at that moment, I can recruit a couple of people. Level 50 is I can take longer term responsibility over something. I can actually organize the structure of something. Then level 100 would be something like, now I'm going to ask you to be the leader of the youth department. Okay, so if you are in an area of leadership, you need to be looking for a level 10 leader. If you're in level 10 leadership right now, you need to be looking for someone that you can train to be a level 10 leader. If you're a level 50 leader in this church, and it doesn't mean it's 50 people, it's a different level. If you are a level 50 leader, you're in charge of a department, you're overseeing a particular area of ministry, you need to find 5 level 10 leaders. And you need to see if any of them are ready and to be trained to step up to be a level 50 leader like you. We always need to be looking for, and we do it by finding who? Servants. Find a servant See if they have level 10 leadership. If they don't, we need servants. If they do, then you train them into level 10. And if you get 3 or 4 level 10 leaders and only one of them steps up to be level 50, that's fine. For every level 50 leader, we need 5 level 10 leaders. And for every 1 level 10 leader, we need 10 followers, 10 servants. So when people stop at certain places along here, that's not a negative. That is simply accurate information that you can now feed into the process. If someone is never going to become more than a level 10 leader, fine. I need 5 more of them than I need level 50 leaders, and I need 10 level 10 leaders for every level 100 leader. I need a lot of level 10 leaders. If that's who you're going to be, that's not bad news for me. That's great. I've got another level 10 leader for my list. I need a lot of them. So when you do this process, the biblical process, there's no losing anywhere. Because when you start with a servant, you're always going to have a servant. If you test them with level 10 leader and they don't pass, it's not a failure. You got a great servant. If they pass that, great. If they don't move to level 50, that's not a failure either. You need a lot of level 10 leaders. But too often, we've got this picture in our head of you either sit and listen to in a church service, or you're going to head an entire department. And we almost don't give anybody anywhere in between to lead. We almost don't see that as leadership. And we need to give people these opportunities, and it's a biblical precedent that we need to be following. Now, let me finish this off before in the 8 minutes that we've got left. Let's talk about raising up new generations, because new generations will serve the church differently than previous generations. And let me walk you through a couple quick illustrations why. New generations will not build the kind of churches that their parents built. In my generation, certainly my parents' and grandparents' generation, we built churches like the destination mindset I talked about before. We found a building, we built it, and in my grandparents' generation, if you wanted to, you couldn't get money out of their pockets faster than to launch a building campaign. They would give up lunches, they would give up extra money, they would go and raise money on an extra job to build a building. If you go to my kids' generation and say, we're raising funds to build a building, they'll look at you like you got 3 heads. They'll go, we got a bunch of buildings around. What do we need another one for? We can meet in a coffee shop. And they're not wrong. They're just differently committed. And here's why. Previous generations had relationships, and they built structures. So previous generations coming out of a mostly agricultural society, coming through World War I, coming through World War II, coming through the building of the infrastructure of our nations, they needed to build these things because they weren't built yet. They had relationships. They trusted their neighbors, and they built stuff. But while those generations were giving us highways and internet, they were also giving us the first divorce and separation culture in our history. And so current generations, they have the structures, and they need to build relationships. Your kids, your grandkids, they've got all the stuff they need. They don't need stuff. They don't need structures. They don't need buildings. They need to know who they are in Jesus and who they are with others. Right now, there's a teenager in a house near you who's sitting on their bed right now, and she's confused about what gender she is. And we can get on Facebook and we can get mad about it and we can laugh about it, and we won't do that kid any good. Because in that kid's life, if the only voices they're hearing are voices of mockery or condemnation over here, or voices of complete acceptance that say, you just be whatever gender you want to be. Gender is just a social construct anyway, and the biblical pattern of male and female doesn't matter anymore. If they're confused in the middle of that, which end are they going to run to? The ones who are mocking them and angry at them, or the ones who say, whatever you believe is okay? And we're not offering a biblical alternative as often as we can, as often as we ought to. And so we've got a generation today that is hungry, thirsting for relationships. This is why the songs have changed. Yeah, I'm going to go there, but I wait till the last 5 minutes to do this. I remember a couple of years ago, 3 or 4 years ago at least, when the song Good, Good Father came out. Remember that? I remember sitting in church on a Sunday morning, the song starts, and I'm sitting on the front row, and the first line goes up, and it's, I've heard 1,000 stories of what they think you're like. And I'm looking at the screen and going, I don't know what those words mean. And then the second line comes up. But I've heard the tender whispers of love in the dead of night. Now, I'm sitting on the front row and I'm the pastor, so I can't let them see my eyes roll into the back of my head on that line. So I just act like I'm in prayer. I'm like, tender whispers of love in the dead of night. The only time I want to sing about tender whispers of love in the dead of night in church is if I'm preaching a sermon on the Song of Solomon. And I'm not. And then they get to the chorus. You're a good, good father. That's who you are. And I'm loved by you. That's who I am. And I look around the room as people I know and love and have pastored for more than 2 decades are breaking in their seats. I look as I see a mother and her 3 grown kids in the second row. And on 2 separate occasions, I have had to physically stand between them and their abusive father. I've had to physically protect them twice. And I watch as that mom and her 3 kids raise their held hands together and they sing, "You're a good, good father. That's who you are. And I'm loved by you. That's who I am." And I watch as their identity changes. And I realize I got to get past my problems with songs that I don't like. But here's the deal. If you're a mature believer, you need to learn to worship Jesus singing songs you don't like. All these songs, they're all for the young kids. Yes, they are. They are, because they're the ones who need the help. You're a grown, mature believer. Act like one. You shouldn't need it. If you need to hear the old hymns, ask your grandkids to show you how to work Spotify. When you come to church as a mature believer, act like a grown-up. And be there to support those who are not grown up. So we sing it for the immature ones? Yes! Yes! Now, does that mean we sing songs with bad theology? No. But if the theology is just not as deep as you'd like it to be, well then, pastor, just preach a better sermon. Right? As mature believers, as leaders in the church, we need to recognize we're not here for us. And if we're going to reach the next generation, we need to realize they don't need more stuff, and they don't need more judgmentalism, and they don't need total no rules whatsoever. They need people who have experience with Jesus, who know Christ, who are willing to step into their lives and sit and listen for a change and not just talk at them. And hear about their hurt and care about their hurt and come back to them again and again in the middle of their hurt. And here's the good news. The kind of situation that this generation is looking for, the kind of relationship and guidance and boundaries that this generation needs, even if they don't know they need it. They are hungry for it. There is no better place for them to get it than in a healthy, small church. We have what they need. It's time we just step up and made sure that they were getting it. So, I hope that's helpful to you. And I hope I didn't make too many of you too mad. But if you're too mad at that one, then it's probably your fault, not mine. So I'm just going to... That was the worst way to end a long talk that I've ever heard, that one line there. But thank you all for your patience. Thanks for this day. And Pastor Johnny, thank you. Now they're going, you, no, you, no, you, no, you.
She's telling me something she needs